Welcome in everyone to May 30th edition of the Vendetta Sports Daily Show. I am Jermaine DePena filling in for Chris Bagdonas, who, from what I see, is enjoying a trip in Europe. So shout out to Chris. Think he's going to be popping his head in here from time to time. So excited to talk some basketball with you today. If you're anticipating anything else that we're going to talk about today, it's not one of those kinds of shows. Matt, I hope you're having a good day today. I'm pretty sure you're ecstatic. But yeah, pretty much we're going to be diving into what we saw in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals and seeing where the Celtics go, where the Miami Heat go in terms of facing off against Denver. Just got to preview the finals after that. So, Matt, how are we doing today, first and foremost, man?
Tired.
I bet.
Last night.
I was going to say, did you get any sleep?
I mean, I usually get a good 5-6 hours. I probably got like 3 or 4.
Yeah, see, for me,
I don't sleep much anyways.
Insomniac.
Yeah, I go to bed late and wake up early. That's kind of my thing. For really no apparent reason. That's just how I'm wired, at least at this stage of my life. Maybe that will change. Maybe that won't. Most likely will at some point. But yeah, no, I didn't get very many hours last night for obvious reasons. If you can see the flag behind me, you have a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I got a lot. For me, I didn't lose a lot of sleep. I'm kind of like in the same boat as you. What is it? I think I'm usually up in bed maybe if I'm lucky just before midnight, but I think this time around was like maybe a little bit after. But it's off and on. But I didn't lose sleep over the game last night. In fact, I cut the game off. So the thing is, I waited until the fourth quarter. I sat through everything all the way until the fourth quarter. I'm like, all right, I'm good. So I watched at least that much. All right. So I'm not. We got some things to talk about, but yeah, Game 7. To be honest, it probably, for one way or another, probably shouldn't even came to this point. But I want to ask you, what did you like about your Miami Heat? I'll let you talk about your Heat, and I'll go into my Celtics because
you don't want to take your medicine first.
What you mean?
Just taking the Boston Celtics medicine. You want me? Okay.
I'll say go ahead because I feel like I let you go on your little tangents and let you go on your rant, air out your grievances wherever you want. But yeah, I got some things I want to talk about, and there's so many things I feel a lot more can be said about what's going on with the Celtics right now in comparison to Miami, because we can talk about the finals and all that stuff going forward. So I want you to talk about. I got one thing I want to say about your Miami Heat for winning.
Spew it.
Caleb Martin should have won MVP.
I've been on record agreeing with you. I think
that's all I'm going to say. I don't think
19.3 points, 60% shooting from the field, 49 from deep, 88 from the free throw line, 6.5 rebounds. He was consistently. I've said this before. I've said it on record. I've said it off record. Plenty of times already in the last few days. He was consistently, I think, their best player this series. I don't think that's a hot take. And just in terms of like whenever Miami was in a hole, Caleb Martin was the one specifically to dig them out of it, at least more often than not. I thought just from like an offensive output standpoint, I mean, you just look at last night as like a prime example, 26 points, 10 rebounds, 11 of 16 shooting, 4 of 6 from deep. He, again, whenever Boston was on a run, whether it was in like the second quarter or the third quarter or whenever, Caleb Martin was primarily the option to respond. He was their top guy. And then at the same time, I mean, his rebounding, I think, just is one of the more underrated parts of his game. He's a good rebounder. He's only 6'5". He had 10 rebounds last night. Again, as I previously mentioned, he had 15 rebounds in Game 6. He just battles on the glass. I mean, he had that one and early in the first quarter where I don't remember who missed the shot, but he barrels in. Tatum tips it out of bounds, but he was like, I mean, if Tatum wasn't there, he would have easily gotten a putback. And he forced a second chance opportunity, because usually if Martin wasn't there, it would have just been a Tatum defensive rebound going the other way. Instead, I don't remember if Miami scored on the subsequent possession or not, but it's those little things that matter. And then his activity at the top of Miami's zone throughout this series, and really just throughout his 2 years in Miami, has just always been one of the things I loved about him. He's always very active. He's lengthy. He knows he's smart enough to know tendencies, and he's quick, and he has a quick twitch to him. And he has good foot speed to where he can stay in front. Like throughout this entire series, whether it was in man or zone, he was defending Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum a lot. There's times where you get burned by that. Like that's not Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are. We could talk about Brown. I mean, he had a bad series. He had a bad game 7, but there's a reason why he's a second team All NBA player. Sometimes, like that's sometimes they just make plays, and you could just throw your hands up and tip your cap in the end. But he was defending the team's best players, and he's been doing that for most of the season. If I'm being completely honest, at least again, just on the perimeter, and he has this kind of offensive output again. 26 points on 11 to 16 shooting. He was huge last night. And I think that's the difference. Like when you go back and look at, like we could talk about this more in a little bit, but it was a tale of two seasons, at least in terms of like from a series perspective for both of these teams. Last year, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, or specifically Jimmy, in game 6 and 7 in last year's Eastern Conference Finals, they did the most, and it was hard for Miami to get help elsewhere, at least in terms of like production wise. This year, it was almost the exact opposite, at least from the latter part of the series. I mean, games 4 through 6, Jimmy wasn't good. He looked physically compromised. He looked tentative, and Boston was just defending him way better than they were in games 1 through 3. And I think that can't go ignored. Like they weren't biting on Jimmy's pump fakes. They were sending 2 or 3 bodies at him whenever Jimmy was getting deep into the lane. They were doubling him at certain points and made him get rid of the ball. Like I think Maz deserves credit for that, because whenever he was getting switches with Al Horford or Robert Williams or et cetera on him, whenever Jimmy would try to take it to the rack, they weren't biting. And it's like that's something that was different from the Knicks series and the Bucks series. Is teams were biting on those pump fakes, and teams were biting on those extra pivots or whatever the case was. And that's how Jimmy creates contact, and that's how he's creating fouls. I mean, there were times you go back and look at it, he's pumping 2, 3, 4 times, nothing. And it's like that's disciplined defense, that's sound defense. And so like they were defending him better in that aspect. But when you get production like you got out of Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent throughout the series when he was healthy, Max Strus at certain points, Kyle Lowry last night in games 1 and 2, like Haywood Highsmith for those couple of possessions that he made that impact where he pickpocketed Tatum, gets the layup on the other end. Like that stuff matters. Duncan Robinson these last few games, like that stuff adds up. And when Jimmy wasn't at his best, and specifically when Bam's shot making wasn't at his best, those guys stepped up. And Caleb was the biggest reason for it. And I think when you look at it in the end, Caleb, I think finished with they showed like the MVP, like the tallies, and I think there's 9 voters, and I think Jimmy finished with 5 and Caleb finished with 4. So I mean, he almost won it. I've been on record saying I would have voted for Caleb. I've also been on record saying that I don't think the voters would have enough guts to vote against Jimmy, specifically after he had 28, 7, and 6, even though I still thought Caleb was the best player last night. And so, yeah, that's what I got to say. Shout out Caleb. Been watching him for a dozen years. This is the best basketball he's ever played, and it warms my heart more than anything in the world. 45 minutes, him just dragging his nuts just all over this series.
That's one way to say it. I mean,
it warms my heart, man. It warms my heart. But
I would say for your sake, that's a turning point for him, because I feel he has, it seems like he has the ability to be at least a really good complementary piece, and a bunch of the guys you named all undrafted or like late in the second round kind of players. I don't know the specifics on there, but a lot of guys that teams passed up on, and kind of like it's the band of misfits. It's the tale of two different series, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you pretty much this entire series as this went on, and I know I wanted to ask you because I wanted to ask you how before going into Game 7, after game like what changed for you for like the first 3 games of the series and then those games 4 through 6,
What do you
and
like?
just like
In what way?
I would say in terms of your confidence in now that your team's in the finals and that's all set in stone. How confident are you guys now? Or are you as a fan compared to them potentially sweeping Boston to having to go to 7?
So here, let me give you the rundown. I mean, I wasn't confident heading into this series. I think I was on record saying Celtics in 6, although like Celtics in 7 was a possibility. I also said, again, I'm prefacing all this by saying that I'm an idiot. But going into the series, I was like, Miami, if Miami's going to win this series, they got to do it in 6. Because Game 7 in Boston, like LeBron James isn't walking through that door. Boston just historically doesn't lose Game 7s in Boston. Like that's just, I think when I looked at it, they were 22-5 all time in Game 7s heading into last night at home. They won 8 out of their last 10. I know they lost, I think, 1. It was the LeBron James 2018 one, and then there was another one that they lost like a while back in like the mid to late 2010s that I don't remember. But in general, they don't lose Game 7s in Boston. Miami also doesn't win Game 7s on the road. They're 0-2. They lost 1 to Atlanta, I think, in 08-09, and then they lost in the second round to Toronto in 2016 in Game 7 in Toronto. And so it's just like, obviously it's a small sample. It's different circumstances, different teams, different makeups, but just from looking at it from a historical standpoint.
Especially these two teams in particular, because for whatever reason, these last two series compared, like going back to last year, these guys love just selling their home crowd for
right.
whatever reason.
Right. So, right. And so it's like, I thought they would just have to close it in 6. And so when Miami got up 3-0, I'm like, what the fuck's happening? Like, I didn't expect it. I don't think anyone expected it. And then Miami, they were up 9 in the third quarter of Game 4, 61-52. Tatum goes out for 25 of his 33 points in that second half. And it's just like, okay, like now you got to close it out in Boston. That's going to be tough. You already won 2 there. And then Boston just couldn't miss a 3. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Is this really going to a Game 6? I was like, I guess it's going to a Game 6. But I'm like, please close this out in 6. Please, 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 pretty please. And my soul, I think, just left my body. Like Derek White, like just grabbed my soul and just ripped it out of my body when he hits that floater. I was just numb, and I'm just like, oh, like, are they really gonna go to 7? Like, is this really happening? And I also, second flag behind me, next to the Heat one, I was like, is this really gonna happen to 2 of my franchises by the same city? Both rivals, and it's just like, oh my god.
It's funny. That was like the talk on Twitter saying like Boston fans shouldn't have no right to be this lucky of a fan base or just
right. And it's just like, oh my, like heading into Game 7, I was like, I think I put it on our Slack NBA chat heading into Game 6 that I was like panic, like on a panic meter between 1 through 10, I was at like a 15. Again, I'm just naturally pessimistic about this stuff happening because I do think momentum's a real thing. Yeah, adjustments can be made. Teams play better. Role players play better in front of their home crowds, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through all those cliches, but like I think momentum is like a real deal sometimes in an NBA playoff series, especially when you figured something out. And it looked like in games 4 through 6, Boston figured something out, and I'm like, oh, god damn it. Just going to a Game 7 in Boston, like, Jesus Christ, it's really come to this. But it's also fitting for the Heat season, no matter what. I've also, I want to say I had a tweet like this, but Miami played 54 clutch games, meaning that 54 of their games at one point during the final 5 minutes, it was a 5-point game, and that led the NBA. So 54 of their 82 regular season games were clutch games. They played, I don't know how many they've played these playoffs. I know both playing games, I believe, were clutch games, or maybe not the Atlanta one, but the Chicago one definitely was a clutch game. So it's like, no matter what, no matter how big a deficit this team was in, and no matter how big of a lead they had, it was always going to be close, and it was always going to be some sort of like sweat in the end. And so I should have probably seen this coming, but at the same time, like,
it's hard just to, like, and it's like I've spoken to you about it on Game 7 before. It doesn't matter what happens. It only matters what happens for those 48 minutes.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a good segue into, I guess, my gripe with what I saw last night. And I guess we would just I'll just take it to talk about the Celtics, and then we'll go into kind of like the Heat's future and all that stuff. Let's just talk about Boston, get them out of the way. I feel there's the talk of the town, and I even said this to James when we were talking, and this was when they were down 3-0. My thing is that I know a lot of people are coming for Joe Mazzulla's head for being down 3-0 in the first place and collapsing pretty much in Game 7. I feel stability in that coach's chair is very important. I feel obviously like Spo is definitely like someone to think about because he's been that Miami coach for damn near 20 years now.
Since 08.
Yeah. So
I think, hold on, let me double check this. I should.
Because I know Pat was the one who coached the 06 team to the championship.
Yeah. And then Pat stepped down. And I mean, Eric he's been in the video room forever. Well, he's been in there since I think 96 or 97, and obviously elevated his way up to an assistant. By the way, just on a side tangent of Eric Spoelstra, not many people know this about Eric Spoelstra, but he was one of the primary people to develop Dwayne Wade as like a rookie and like throughout his career. And so like as someone he worked with Dwayne a lot, and so I don't think that gets talked about enough. But no, looking at it right now, since 08, yeah. Because Miami had like a 15-win season, I think, in between their title run and that season. Or no, it was his first. He got hired in 08. His first official season was 08-09.
Oh, okay. All right.
But that's still.
But you see but you see my point. You have stability in in that coach's chair, in that front office, kind of. And I feel if the Celtics were to switch off, it has to be like the right move in terms of getting a good coach, or there's probably going to be something that's going to have to change because obviously for me, I don't really care I wouldn't really care about the Ime Udoka situation, but from what I've seen and what I read upon, like people are trying to say that the Celtics kind of overreacted. And again, this is not my opinion, and I really don't have an opinion on the whole situation. But if Ime was still there, like I like the way Ime was in terms of coaching. He didn't let the players get no flack. I enjoyed the fact that he was like, if he called a timeout and he was pissed about something, you saw the look on his face, and he was saying like, get in the huddle, and he was losing his mind.
That nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. But also he was a player's coach as well. Like he obviously former player, known exactly. So I like Ime as a coach, and I believe he ended up taking the Rockets job now. So
which is very funny. But
so but for me, I just I feel like that's something they're gonna evaluate. Obviously Jason Tatum getting compromised the very first possession of the game is not a good look. I feel the game probably would have been a little bit different because I believe he finished with 14 points, nearly a triple double, but still only like 14 points. And like he just but he just didn't look right at all. So for him. But not to say that he just didn't have a good postseason. People love to say that Jason Tatum was like overrated and like this, that, and the third. This dude averaged on 46% from the field in the postseason. He averaged 27, 11 pretty much, and 5. And those are superstar level numbers. And that game yesterday when Tatum went down, Jaylen Brown could have easily stepped up and had his game. I don't think Jaylen Brown in the postseason had his defining game. Like, hey, I'm here too. I'm a part of the squad too. And like last night was a chance for him to do that, but then he's plus minus -17. So, and with 8 turnovers. So that's another thing. They shot 0-10 from the 3 to start the game off. And the thing is that I saw, and I kept saying to myself the entire length of the series, don't get in a shootout with this team, because in the postseason, like if you get in a shootout, at least in the series that I saw, if you got into a shootout with the Miami Heat, you were going to lose. So it was like Miami had Robinson getting off of Bam screens and knocking down threes, Strus knocking down threes. Martin was taking those threes in rhythm, taking those out like second chance points. Kyle Lowry shooting threes. The thing that was annoying me sometimes. My thing is like I didn't like how a guy would just die on a screen, and you have Al just standing here just in the middle and just allowing them to just shoot. It's just the finals all over again. You see Steph off a screen. Oh, hey. Oh, he shoots. Oh, he scored.
Oh, okay. The drop coverage, and it's just like you shouldn't be playing drop against Steph.
Most annoying thing. So I feel like there's a lot of decisions that come with Boston. My initial reactions, I'm glad. I know a lot of people say this, and it seems like it's a lot more cliche now that people say, I'm glad a lot of these people on social media aren't in the front office, because this team would be a dumpster fire. And you can say that about pretty much just NBA Twitter altogether. For me, I said this to James even when they were down 3-0. You do not break up Tatum and Brown. And I appreciate Tatum kind of going up to bat for his guy, saying that the Celtics should extend Jaylen Brown. And I believe that. I know the CBA and stuff is making things weird, and there's a lot of money you're gonna have to invest in those guys. Yep. My thing is that you need to look to see if you can build a better supporting cast around those two, because ever since Jaylen Brown has been in the NBA, the Celtics, in the 7 years I believe he's been, because I believe he was a part of the 2016 draft. So ever since the 2017 season, technically 7 years, Jaylen Brown, a Celtics team with Jaylen Brown has made the Eastern Conference Finals 5 times out of the 7 years. And that's the Eastern Conference, not just making the playoffs. So I feel like you can't break those guys up. Like you just need to do a better job of building around those guys. And I think Jaylen will come back like kind of with a chip on his shoulder in that regard. He'll get his money, no doubt. But but yeah, I feel there's a lot of things. And for me, I would just want them to trade for a legit third star. Because in all honesty, my last point, I guess, from what I'll say, at least right now, is that they love trying to showcase how much depth we have, how much depth that the Celtics team has. And then you just go run a 7-8 man rotation, and then with one of your stars gets compromised, you guys can't compensate for that kind of thing. So I mean, Miami showed that they had a lot more depth than the Celtics team did, apparently. So but kudos to Miami. I like, a lot of people say they don't want to see Denver versus Miami, but I feel it's going to be a fun series regardless. It has a story.
Those people can go to hell.
I'm not one of them. But my thing is that I feel it's going to be a lot more fun than people are going to give it credit for. At least that's my hope anyway. I don't want things to just like immediately go south. Like, this isn't the same Miami Heat team that made it to the NBA Finals in the bubble. But what I will say is that it's definitely going to be an uphill battle, because I look at Denver and just, I don't know what's good. I've kind of been torn between what's more beneficial for, was it Miami having to go and play those extra 3 or 4 games with Boston, or is it the amount of rest that Denver has got? Because Denver was red hot when they clinched their series against the Lakers. So I mean, I guess that's something I'm curious to like kind of pick your basketball brain about, and how you look at it. Like, do you give more edge to teams that have to play more playoff games, or more rest days during the postseason?
I think rest. And I'll say this from the standpoint of Jimmy's been dealing with a bad ankle since game 1 of the Knicks series, which was like a month ago, it feels like. I don't know actually how long it was ago, but it was a long time ago. And then, I mean, Gabe rolled his ankle in this series. Kyle is he's just older, and he's perpetually banged up to some extent. I know Bam hurt his hip in the Knicks series. I don't know how much that's recovered. These teams are playing every other day for 2 weeks. And then when you get Denver, who's had 8-9 days of rest, something along those lines, like, and you're playing in altitude, like, that stuff affects you. And that was one of the gripes of me, like, obviously Miami won in the end, so like I could honestly not care less, but I would have much rather preferred Miami close us out in 4 or 5. Because, I mean, again, as this series went on, Jimmy just looked physically compromised, and I think he was in his own head about it a little bit. Again, Boston deserves credit for the way they were defending him differently, but just from like a physical standpoint, I mean, he just didn't have the lift or burst that he had in the Bucks series, and I think it's part of the ankle, the knee that he's been dealing with for God knows how long. Like, I think that has something to do with it. And so it's like now you have 2 days rest. I mean, there are more rest days built into the finals, so I should also say that. Like,
game one every 3 days.
Yeah, game 1's Thursday. Well, game 2 is then Sunday, and then game 3 is on Wednesday. And so it's like game 7, I think, isn't until like should there be a game 7, it's not until like, I don't know, I think the 17th or 18th. I don't remember the exact date, but it's around those times where it's like you have you have practically 2.5 weeks for 7 games should it go that far. And so there's going to be, it's not just an every other day deal. And so that's just an extra day of rest for travel, for treatment, whatever the case is. And so that isn't the worst thing in the world, but like I would give the edge to Denver in that aspect. I mean, Denver just hasn't lost at home. They didn't lose at home during the regular season. I think they finished like 33-8 or 34-7, something along those lines. They're a really good home team. The altitude obviously like makes a difference. And when you're in Miami, you come off this grueling ass, stressful 7-game series. Oh, guess what? Now you got to go to Denver and play in altitude for 2 games. Have fun, buddy. Like that's gonna be a pain in the ass for them to play in. I should watch more, but like it's gonna be a pain. It's gonna be a pain in the butt for them to play in, and so it's like from that perspective, yeah. If they finish this off in 5 games or 4, like whatever it is, it would have been much more advantageous for them to at least adjust to the altitude. It would give them more time. It would give them more time for treatment. Because the Denver Nuggets are no slouch, and I don't know if I said this to you. I said this before though, that there was no team at the time that I trusted more in the NBA playoffs than the Denver Nuggets, and I think I said that in the conference finals, just among the teams left. And I still hold that perspective. But to be the best, you got to beat the best, and Miami's got to beat the best. And I think truly right now, Denver is the best. They played the best. They have the best offense. They have the lowest turnover rate. They're the best rebounding team. They're one of the best defensive teams. They have the best player in the world, arguably. They have who's the 2-time MVP. They have a phenomenal supporting cast with Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Christian Brown, Bruce Brown, you name it. I have a lot of respect for that team. It's going to be fucking dogfight. It's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be in the mud. But to answer your question, I think rest clearly serves a more advantageous angle for Miami. And unfortunately, they now have 2 days rest. It's a quick turnaround. I mean, again, you come off this exhilarating win, you're on a flight to Denver. Like it's that quick. You're not going home. At least not that I've read. There was the reports that came out before yesterday's game. It's like, yep, they already have a flight booked to Denver, not Miami. It's just like, oh boy, is this gonna come back and bite us?
I mean, like I take that with a grain of salt because when you think about it, it's game 7, so you would think both teams would have a flight booked, you know?
Right. But like that's the thing where it's just like it just gives. You'd think it would give Boston the extra. It's like bulletin board material.
It didn't.
It didn't. But like every team does do that. But I would love for that not to come out at, I don't know, middle of the day of the game,
like as you're waiting for the game to come on.
Yeah. But
I would say it's funny that I was thinking about it because I actually like have some notes and I was like taking a look at like what the series was going to look like. But it's funny because that time frame that I told you about with the Celtics making the conference finals, I looked in teams that have beaten the Celtics in the conference finals to go on to the NBA finals. They're 3-12, and obviously that was like LeBron led versus the Warriors, and obviously like you can just take that stat with a little bit of grain of salt. I just thought that was interesting to look at.
The Magic.
And well, I mean, yeah, them too, but I don't think I factored them in. I think I only factored in teams that had Jaylen Brown because they're kind of like this era of Celtics because those guys have made the conference finals damn near every other season. But yeah, then at that point you can say like I believe like 5-14 with the Magic beating the Celtics, I believe, because I think they beat them in 6. But okay, but I would want to ask like, what's your biggest concern? Because at least in terms of going up against Denver, because the amount of guys you named, Jamal, Gordon, Porter. I don't think you mentioned the Joker, but like Bruce Brown and a bunch of those guys. I think the shortest guy you named there was Jamal Murray at 6'4". So that I feel like the length of Denver is probably going to be a cause for concern. But I just want to hear your thoughts.
My biggest concern, well, Joker's going to get his. I didn't really think about Denver a whole lot, I'll be honest, over these last several games, just because
Understandable.
My team was ripping me apart and possibly blowing a 3-0 lead. And so I was like, this felt like the finals. And then it's like, oh, wait, actually,
shit,
not really. But just dating back to like, it's hard to go back and watch regular season film of these two games between Denver and Miami, because it was like Omer Yurtseven and Jamari Bouye are getting minutes for Miami. Like this was during a time where just Miami was banged up, and I think both teams were. I think there was a game where Jamal and it was either Gordon or NPJ didn't play, and then there was another where Miami was also banged up with their depth, and it was just like there wasn't much to take away from it. But like the thing that I did take away from it was Bam for 40 to 45 minutes made Joker's life incredibly difficult, just with the physicality, with fronting him, with making it hard on him to get to his spots. But yet Joker, it's at towards the end of those games or at certain points in those games, just did Joker shit and went off, and that was a problem. But my problem isn't necessarily with that, because I know he's going to get his. It's stopping everyone else. Can Miami limit what Jamal does? Can Miami limit what Michael Porter Jr. does? Can Miami limit the occasional spurts of Aaron Gordon or Bruce Brown? And that it's not from just an offensive perspective. It's everything. Like, I'm guessing Aaron Gordon's going to get the Jimmy assignment. Aaron Gordon, from what I can remember, has given Jimmy problems in the past. Not playoff Jimmy, because they haven't faced in the playoffs, but regular season Jimmy. And like, again, still a good player, but like that length can be an issue. How is Miami going to how are they going to generate those mismatches? Are they going to pick on Jamal? And I know Denver loves to send two to the ball. How are they going to, how many actions are you going to work for Duncan Robinson, whether it's like a Chicago action or a staggered screen? That's where his playmaking comes into play. If they flash to the ball, he's good at pocket passes. Like, how are you gonna move them around on both ends of the floor? How are you gonna limit their productivity? And because again, I know Joker's gonna get his. I think that's a given at this point. He's been the best player of these playoffs. I don't think it's gonna be, you're gonna have to play a game of chicken. Are you gonna double him? Are you gonna front him? How are you going to defend him? How much help are you going to send him? Who are you going to be helping off of? And who are you going to be helping? Like, are you going to be helping off of Michael Porter Jr. as much as Jamal Murray? I mean, they're going to help off Aaron Gordon, but he's one of 5 guys on the floor, one of 3 other guys that they could help off of for Nikola Jokic if they choose to double him. Like, how do you go about this stuff? And that's how much zone are you going to play? I think that's another reason, because it's like you have the best center in the league, best player in basketball, throwing passes behind his head, behind his back, has eyes everywhere around his face. Yeah, it just well, there's that backdoor cutter that no one saw it because
that's something else that I like. Those guys are just so good at moving just as a team.
Right.
And like
right.
it's just perfect for them. So somebody would cut out the corner, cut out the
Yeah.
wing, screen, cut, it's like, what the hell are you supposed to do?
Like Joker will throw one here and then throw like right there, like just guys roaming around the dunker spot. Just whoop, and it's just like, well, he's 7 foot. He has eyes in the back of his head. He's the most accurate passer probably in basketball. He knows the velocity and he knows the precision that he has to put on each and every pass. He knows what pass to make, whether it's a lob, whether I'm throwing a dart cross court, whether I'm gonna bounce past it. Like he can make every single pass, and that's like, okay, how much zone are you gonna play? Because when he gets in the middle, well, son of a you know what, that's gonna be a little bit of a problem at times.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I guess I don't know if I have like a biggest concern because there's a lot of like different, and I'm sure you could say the same about Denver. I mean, when Miami's shooting the ball this well,
yeah, they can shoot 46%. I think they have a fighting chance.
Yeah, right. And like I know Denver was up and down defensively at points during the regular season, but it's just like, okay, how many actions are they going to put Jokic in? Like, are they going to go high pick and roll every single time down the floor? How are they going to go about that type of stuff along with the actions that you're going to try to run for Duncan Robinson or Max Strus or Caleb Martin or whatever? Like, there might not be like set design plays. Like, how are you going to use Bam Adebayo as a playmaker, as a facilitator, or even as a scorer? Like, are you going to try to get him in 4-on-3, 3-on-2 advantages with him as a roller? Are you going to try to use him in the mid to high post as a facilitator, which they didn't throughout this Boston series? Like, how are you going to bring Jokic out? How are you going to move him around? Again, like, I just have plenty of questions right now, and I'm probably going to get more answers the more I dive into the tape later today. But those are just some preliminary, I guess, questions that I have for this series. But I do want to touch on Boston a little bit more because I know you went on your Boston tangent.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying you would pay Jaylen? You would give Jaylen Brown the supermax? Is that?
I would give him that money. Yes, I feel the Celtics. There's not another player out there. Let alone like I feel like a package, because like the Celtics really have like two of the best wing players in the league. Like when you look at the Celtics and their two stars, everybody in the NBA wants a player like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. Mm-hmm. If the Nuggets win the championship, everybody's going to want a passing 5'2" big man, if that's even right. a term, but an all around big man that could do it all. And something I would say, just to touch on Miami for a second, is that Miami just proved why the NBA is like their playoff format is what it is now. They completely justified the play-in tournament for this run that they're on now.
This is
for better or for worse.
An insane run. It's an insane run.
So for better or for worse, like it pretty much solidified like the play-in is probably going to be here to stay, as well as the playoff format that they got. So if anything, I feel like right. It's good for them anyway. But I guess for the NBA standpoint, it's good for them. But going back to Jaylen Brown, I just don't see how this team is better with him not on the floor or on this team. And another thing is that I know people were saying like, oh, I'll trade Jaylen for Anthony Simons in the 3rd overall pick to Portland. Let me say this, because I haven't been keeping up with a lot of the draft stuff. Pretty much what it seems like Portland would take with that pick is Scoot Henderson. So
well, if he falls, I mean, there's the rumor of like they might take Brandon Miller too. Or Charlotte might take Brandon Miller too. They might take Scoot. It'd be one of those two guys. Or if they really got balls, it'd be Amin Thompson.
Okay, so I can see from what I saw for some of the like the projections, it was like a lot of small. It was kind of like small forward heavy lottery. So I mean, yeah, the Celtics could, let's say they for whatever reason made that trade and they trade for Anthony Simons, a 6'2", 3-point guard who like good scorer, and I feel like he's a good complementary piece. But then
athletic as hell, so that's fun.
I think former slam dunk champion as well. So I mean, but then with that 3rd overall pick, I feel the Celtics are in a position where they're trying to build around their stars instead of trying to build it from the ground up again. Because I feel those guys have been more successful with playing together than not playing together. unless there's something we don't know. I'm only looking at it from the eyeball test, and it seems like both of them want to stay where they're at. And I hope that Jalen understands that it's because of the positions he's in that he's going to be in the center of like trade rumors and stuff for stars. And again, I don't know the whole story. Maybe like from my understanding, they offered him up to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant, or maybe not. I don't know. And like the Celtics as a franchise has been prone to just trading young guys for established superstars and stuff like that to kind of like build championship level teams, a la the '08 Celtics, and even before that, the Larry Bird led Celtics as well. But my thing is for this team, you got to look to, I would say, trade in that depth that you covet so much and try to form get a legitimate third star if at all possible. And I said the same thing with this to James, is that if you're going to prioritize these two, then you gotta go all in. You can't half-ass it, because then you're going to be stuck in the middle. And I would at least have a set plan and try to go about getting a third star. And it seems, at least at the moment, people just are like, trade with Portland, but get Damian Lillard. Don't trade Jalen, like that kind of thing. I don't know how likely something like that would happen. I hope they kind of have a shift in personnel anyway. But I feel that they should try again, because look how good the depth did you. And like Malcolm Brogdon, he was a good player, and it sucks that he went down at the worst possible time. He had himself a good season. When he's healthy, he's a sixth man of the year. And then literally just lost his shooting touch because of that injury in his arm. And he just looked like he shot and he was just hurt, because it looked like he was trying to force it up. Like, he shoots weird altogether, but like it's like he's trying to force it up,
right?
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like you can trade something like I like Al, but I kind of wish Al was like maybe 5 or 8 years younger, and I think he probably would have been like a solidified guy to stick around.
He had moments throughout this postseason,
but then there's also plenty of moments that he looked old, especially in this series. So Derek White, I feel like he was playing his heart and playing his ass off and playing his heart out even before that buzzer beater. And even him and like Rob Will were like the only guys that seemed like they wanted to like actually gave a damn that it was a game 7. I gave Tatum the pass because like I've played games where like you twist an ankle, and like especially that one was like what Reggie Miller said was a clean turn. So sometimes it's just not good. So I can't put it on him, and he's a historically great game 7 performer. So I'll give him that pass. Jalen, I want him to stick around. I think he is a far better player than what we saw in the postseason. And it's just it just is like that sometimes for him. And my thing is that they need to have somebody to kind of like the kryptonite for them a lot of the time, like down the stretch in the series, was when Miami went into the zone and they just didn't know what they had to do. They just kept passing the ball around, just trying to chuck up ugly ass jumpers. But I would say if they ended up getting, I would much rather them go for a big man if they could. But if they went with somebody like Dame or somebody like that, somebody that can legit pretty much be what like they wanted Kemba Walker to be, but just a lot better, not like an undersized guy if they can help it, but like somebody like Dame who's I feel like is an underrated playmaker, because he's like always near like the top in assist numbers, which is crazy. And this dude's still like tops in points per game, and I think he's gonna age very, very well. Like obviously he can kind of like at his best he can jump out the gym with the best of them, but realistically you have him there for shot creation, and he's the guy you would give the ball to get a bucket. And I feel they were lacking in that kind of aspect. It was kind of like what they wanted Kyrie to be as well. But I feel they either need to go for like an elite scoring point guard who can kind of like calm the offense down, or kind of like just help the offense get that next gear, or they need to look to get somebody who can kind of command on the defensive end like Rob, but it can also, which is kind of hard to come by, getting a 3-and-D big man, if that makes sense. But I feel like there's just, those are like the things I feel they need to look at, because depth don't mean shit if you're not playing everybody in the playoffs. So
yeah, and it's an interesting situation, because like typically when you go later in the series, there's just guys that you trust and don't trust, and you typically play the guys that you trust. And it's just like, I've said this maybe to you before, but like you would start with like 8 or 9 guys. It just all depends on the roster construction, but you would start with 8 or 9 guys at the start of the postseason. But like as this postseason goes on, you're crunching that rotation, and like as the series goes on, you're crunching that rotation. Like Miami was going with 9 guys to begin the series. That all of a sudden it's just like, okay, Cody Zeller, you're not playing well. We're gonna just cut your minutes. And Kevin Love, you're not playing well. We're gonna cut your minutes. Neither of them played in Game 7. I mean, I know Zeller got a few minutes in Game 6. They were a bad few minutes, but they got a few minutes nonetheless. And so it's like, that's just what happens as the series goes on. And it's just like, it's hard to prepare for Tatum rolling his ankle. And like, that did change the tone of the game. And it was weird that Maz came out, I think after I wanted to see, I read this somewhere that like, he said they didn't make any like adjustments. And it's just like, that's not a good look to say after Game 7 that you lose when your best player gets hurt. But that's besides the point. But like, they're in an interesting situation because it's like, I'm looking at it right now. Brogdon's making $22.5 million this upcoming season, $22.5 in 24-25. Marcus Smart has 3 years left on his deal. He's making $18.6 million next season. Derek White has 2 years left on his deal. He's making $18.4 million next season. Robert Williams has 3 years left, 11.6. Al Horford, 2 years left, $10 million, but that decreases. It's front loaded, so it decreases to 9.5 in 24-25. Danilo Gallinari has a player option that he's likely going to opt into because he signed the taxpayer last offseason. He has $6.8 million. Peyton Pritchard, really just $4 million, even though he did, I think, request that trade or whatever it was midseason.
I think he'll be probably looking out for next year.
Huh?
If he's in a different situation, I think he probably finds himself as like a good rotation piece somewhere.
I think he does too. Mike Muscala, weird trade deadline acquisition, make 3.5. And then obviously Cornette, Champagny, and then Hauser. Hauser has 1 year. He has one guaranteed year left. He has a club option for 24-25, but it's like negligible. But like they still have decisions to make, and then they have Grant Williams was his last game as a Boston Celtic yesterday. He's a restricted free agent. Boston can match whatever offer teams, whatever offer sheets that are thrown his way. I don't know what that's going to look like after how he played this season. And then J.D. Davidson, Mufundu Kabengele. I mean, those are like two-way guys. So, but like just Boston has decisions to make if they're not like they have the salary filler contracts that they could to trade these guys. Like you want guys in between the 10 to 20 million ranges. Like, hey, if we need a contract to make the money match, like here you go. And they have the Marcus Smart if they want to do that. I don't know if Brad has the balls to trade Marcus Smart just because of what Marcus has done for the franchise. But I'm not very critical of Brad. I think he's done an all right job. There's been missteps along the way, but like if you don't at least what GM does it at certain points, right?
Yeah.
Robert Will, like, are they going to trade Rob? Like, what does his trade value look like? Derek White's trade value may never be higher. And so that's also something to consider. I mean, I know he had one of the greatest buzzer-beating shots in recent playoff history. Unfortunately, that for them, that pretty much got wiped. I mean, it would have been much more remembered probably years from now.
No, absolutely. You probably would have never heard the end of it.
Right. At least I wouldn't. But in regards, like his trade value may never be higher. Malcolm Brogdon, I know he's coming off a forearm injury, but he's again still won 6th man of the year. I thought he had a good season. His playoffs were a little bit weird, but for the most part, he's a good player. And I know some team, all it takes is one team to take a chance on him. $22.5 million, that's a lot of money. And again, like when we're talking about the new CBA and the second tax apron and the restrictions that it would have if you exceed that second tax apron, which is projected to be around 179 to 180 million. These are decisions that you have to make. But the thing that I will say about the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum situation is you have really a 2-year window for this because Jaylen's extension wouldn't kick in until 24-25. And so that would be what? I don't know, 55 million. I think Jackson put something in the chat.
Yeah, he said like it could get up to as high as 60 million.
It depends. It depends on what this official salary cap would be because of the Supermax and like how that's like 35%, I believe, of like the actual like what the cap is. But regardless, it would be around that range. So then Jalen or Jason wouldn't have his Supermax extension eligible for not this upcoming offseason, but the following season. So he can sign his before 24-25. Well, that I think won't kick in until I maybe it might not, because he has the player option in 25-26. So it might not be. It actually might be a year later now that I think about it. But regardless, he's still got time. And so they really have a 2-year gap for this. And so it's not like
on the alarm bells.
Yeah. So it's not like this extension would kick in this offseason. You would still have another year for that. And so it's like, yeah, the cap is going to go up. The second tax apron is going to go up, but you still got to build around it. You still got to plan around it. And that's what I didn't like about the timing of this new CBA. It's like, well, you're doing this in March. You wouldn't give teams at least a little bit of like, I think there's like weird like rules about when it would end and expire or whatever, but it's still one of those things that's screwy where it's like, you won't give teams an extra off season before this second apron is implemented. Before like this, because there's all these restrictions. Like the Warriors are screwed pretty much for all intents and purposes just because of their cap situation. The Nets, before they would trade Kyrie and Kate, like they weren't in a good spot. The Clippers aren't in a good spot. Like there's multiple teams that it's not just Boston that are in like they're having to make plenty of these decisions just like on the fly. Like, oh, I actually have 2 months to prepare for this, not an entire season, because it's like if you were to implement this in 24-25, or at least after the 23-24 season, it's like, okay, I can have an off season to kind of construct my roster so I can plan for what's ahead. Yeah, plan A might not work, but you want to have plans B, C, D, and et cetera, et cetera. But the timing of it was so screwy where it's just like, okay, now Jaylen Brown is Supermax eligible. And now instead of the extension being 120%, it's now 140% of what his previous did. So it's just all this shit that's just piled on to Boston. It's just like, oh my God. Like now Brad's probably ripping his hair out. Like, okay, now the series that Jaylen Brown just had, do we really want to give him $55 million? Like that's a legitimate question that they're going to have to think about. I don't know where they would lean on that. I don't know if I would do it. I would have to give it more thought and consideration. It depends on what you do elsewhere. I don't know if does Jaylen want to be back? That's another part of this. It's like, he's probably going to take the money. Most players would. Practically every player would.
But $60 million potentially a season.
$60 million, but it's just like those weird quotes that I don't know how serious he was. I don't know if that was a leverage play or what the case was. Like, those quotes about him being like, like it just felt like he was hesitant. He wasn't like fully committed. I don't know how true that is now. And I'm just saying that of someone who's just reading it. And it's just like, there's plenty of additional context. Again, it might be a leverage play. It might not be. Players have cryptic quotes all the time. Most of the time they don't mean anything. Sometimes they do actually mean something. And so they're all that you're trying to juggle all this. So it's like, when I look at it from an outsider's perspective, plus what the hell did they do with Joe Mazzulla? Do they fire him? Do they don't fire him? What candidates would they have? Like Frank Vogel, I know, was like a hot name to potentially be on the bench for Boston before the season. I know Brad Stevens with the whole Ime Udoka situation had such a quick turnaround, so it's just like, okay, 2 of our assistants left. Will Hardy got hired by the Jazz. Damon Stoudemire went to Georgia Tech. Now we're going with our 4th assistant. So it's just like he was put in a bad spot there, and I'm sure you could have improved the assistant coaching staff, but regardless, they hired a 34-year-old head coach who was younger than Al Horford, a player on the team.
Damn near the same age as Jimmy.
Yeah.
They played in college, so.
And he's just like, this is his first year. He's thrown into the fire a little bit. He didn't have the worst season. He definitely had lumps. There was stuff that I was critical of. There's probably stuff that plenty of Boston fans were critical of. They make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They come back down 3-0. I thought he coached better as the series went on, with the exception of Game 7. And now you're forced in a spot where it's just like, okay, do you bring him back? Do you not? This would be 4 head coaches in 4 years if they don't bring him back. And so it's just like, as you mentioned before, the continuity standpoint, like, yeah, continuity is important. Like, this would be 4 coaches in 4 years: that Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Should he be on the roster next year? Like all of these guys had these head coaches, and it's just like, okay, at what point is it the players? At one point is it the coaches? It could be both. It could be a mix of whatever it is. But it's just there's a lot of shit. There's a lot of questions that you got to answer. And Brad Stevens, this is going to be some interesting offseason that he has, because it's just like, do you give Jaylen Brown the money? Do you trade Brogdon, Smart, White, whomever? Who do you acquire? Who do you target? How do you fill this out? How do you stay below that second apron so you can still sign minimum guys, buyout guys, whatever the case is?
I would say
a lot. It's a lot of stuff. That's where I'm kind of like, I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens. Do you re-sign Grant Williams? Do you match whatever teams are gonna? Is Houston or someone you're just gonna throw $20 million at and being like, hey, dare you to match this? If you don't, well, we have the salary cap to sign him to this money.
Well,
for better or worse.
You got the salary cap to sign Grant Williams to an $100 million deal. You are going about your franchise all wrong if that's the guy you're going to throw money at.
But right, but like that teams are going to do that. Some team is going to talk themselves into it because he's a 3-and-D wing
at his best.
When watching Grant Williams dribble a basketball and drive to the rim can be a little tough, but like when you're coached by, like, if Houston does it, well, guess who's his head coach? Ime Udoka. Ime Udoka knows the Grant Williams experience, and so it's like maybe they're the ones that actually do it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but like these are serious questions, like serious questions, and it's just like, again, Brad probably, as every front office does, they have a plan A. They have
at least I would hope so.
They have a plan C, and you have plans A through Z, and then some. Because it's like, oh, if Jaylen Brown doesn't want to come back, well, now we got to trade him. He has 1 year left on his deal. He's an expiring contract. That's going to be appealing to some team. Well, then what can you get back from him, or for him, excuse me? Like, and if, okay, let's say you give him the Supermax. Okay, now you have $50 million on your books for 24-25. Well, guess what? Again, Malcolm Brogdon's going to be making $22.5 million that season. Marcus Smart's going to be making nearly $20 million. Derek White's going to be making $18.5. Robert Williams is going to be making $12.5. And so it's just like, okay, then do I move any of those guys? Al Horford's going to be making $9.5. Who do I move for what? What's their trade value look like? What type of assets are these other teams viewing them as? Because I guarantee you Boston views their assets better than most organizations view Boston's assets. And I think that's how it is for every organization. How are you going to go about it?
I would say that there's going to be a shakeup in some aspect of this team, whether it's the players, whether it's coaches, whether it's both. But something's coming, because at least for me, after seeing how this postseason went, I don't think you guys can run it back with the same group. I don't think. I think the one guarantee we'll see is that we'll see Jason Tatum on the roster, because Jason Tatum has solidified himself as he's going to be potentially looked at as one of the best playoff performers in NBA history. No matter if he wins a championship, it would really solidify it. But Trey, the boss, entering the chat, he said trade Brogdon, shouldn't have gone for him in the first place. And I would say
he is an asset.
He is, and
I don't know what his value looks like now, but he is an asset.
I mean, even if you don't look at it at the talent level, he can at least be a player to throw in to kind of help match salaries and stuff for like a big trade. Like, even if you added him and Horford as just like to match salaries, because at least for me at this point, for like the first or the whatever draft picks we have, I view those as like just up on the table. Well, I guess with the right protections, or even unprotected. But obviously, if you can get the right protections on those picks in place, I don't care how many you ship out. If it means getting a good player, if you're prioritizing this core for a championship, which I think that's what they're going to try to do, at least try to build around these two guys. And Jason Tatum's only 25 years old. He's not going to be 26 until March of next year. And Jaylen, he's going to be 27 by the time next season comes around. And I still think with Jaylen just going into his prime, I would say that's a conversation you're going to need to have with him. Like, hey, do you want to stay? Need wing depth? Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to see that. What was it? I actually saw they were looking at. It was funny.
Danilo Gallinari. That's what you got him for.
Yeah, they got
hurt.
Yeah, Gallinari. Is he going to be like Is he going to be like old man Horford 2.0 and just be like, because it sucks because I like if we had Gallo maybe a few years ago or had him be a few years younger, great piece. I don't know what he's going to look like after coming off that ACL injury, but
yeah,
I mean,
you can't predict that stuff. But
yeah. So athleticism really.
Didn't you get hurt like playing like international ball? Or
Yeah, it was like the
worst
FIBA or like the World Cup
that could happen.
Yeah, so I mean, athleticism really has never been his strong suit, but I feel he would probably be a good addition if he opts into his player option, which I think he will. But yeah, I feel like whatever depth we have, they can use that to trade for a third star or get some more wing depth around Tatum and Brown, which is like a premium in today's NBA, tall guys who can shoot. So yeah, but I feel like a trade is coming. I feel like maybe some personnel changes may be in order.
I mean, the trade's got to come. I just don't know who or for what.
Yeah. The next thing you know, and that's what makes me excited about the offseason, because at least then that's where the optimism comes back after your team like kind of disappoints in the postseason or doesn't make the postseason altogether, and then like that optimism comes back. You're like, oh, we got a couple of new faces. It sucks to see some of these other guys go, but hopefully whatever changes they make are changes for the better and just not reactionary moves as to what happened, because the offseason probably could have been seen as a lot worse of a thing to worry about if they lost like 4 or 5 games. I'm proud enough of this team, and I'm proud enough of Joe Mazzulla to at least coach his way back into the series, even if he shat his pants in Game 7. So I that's something I can't take away from him. He could have easily, and these guys could have easily just like rolled over, like just would have just folded and rolled over and just lost in 5 games or 4 games. So I give them credit. So I guess that's something to hold like our heads on. But obviously, like most Celtics fans would be like, no, we didn't end up completing the comeback. You know, it's like it's the game's over. It's done. I'm just waiting for the optimism to come back in the offseason. And at least I'm not in the same boat as Miami right now, having to watch finals games and be like, shit, the feelings are coming back again. Because like it's not the optimism, but like that pessimism. Is that even a word?
Pessimistic.
Pessimistic, yeah, the pessimistic and just like that worrisome like feelings that you get that the postseason is. So I'm like,
the NBA Finals, man. This is the shit that I love.
I was like, at least that feeling is gonna be gone for me. At least like, fine, my horse. I don't have a horse in the race anymore, so I can just be like, all right, cool, fine. I'll wait for the optimism to come back in the offseason.
As brutal as it was for me through games 4 through 6, excuse me, in terms of like from an emotional standpoint, the feeling of an NBA Finals, if you can at least get it's first to 4, both teams are at 0. I can at least say that. But no, that's the reason why I just love making just the playoffs. It's the nervous ass shit. It's the stressful nights. It's the sleepless nights as a fan.
It's you not wanting to watch the games, but you watch them anyway.
Yeah, and it's just all the emotions. There's nothing better as like a fan. I'm sure as a player, just nothing better. So I mean, but yeah, no, the optimism. Or I mean, heck, I just don't know what this Boston offseason is going to look like. Like, I don't know how much optimism there's going to be. You can at least talk yourself into it. And I don't think they're not going to like blow it up. I don't think, unless Jalen really wants out. Or
unless like you hear like he specifically request a trade. I feel like that's why that conversation would be the most important thing to have with him, because at least to get an understanding, like, hey, do you want to stick around? And like, do you like, even if it's like you have Jason going, like talk to him about it, because like, I mean, like it's crazy to think of, because like I've pretty much followed these 2 guys, and these are kind of like the first like 2 players that like I've seen like kind of grow up before our eyes. I remember Jalen was just like a shy kid from California, well, from Atlanta technically, but a shy kid from California with a damn jukebox fade and buck teeth. So, you know, and then like Tatum, like when these guys, so like I have like a whole sentimental value in just seeing those guys grow up, because I remember watching Jaylen Brown get drafted, like watching the draft and seeing him get drafted. And I was the same draft. I was like, damn, I wish we got Ingram. Damn, I wish we got Buddy Hield. Like when I was like 15 years old.
Right.
So, but seeing these guys grow up and seeing like becoming the player that like not only that like the Celtics were looking at, but like I feel like what the Celtics needed. They needed like somebody to kind of carry on that torch and kind of like from like the Pierce and KG era, and then like IT held that torch for a little bit, and then obviously we saw how that ended up. He was there game 7, and I'm happy that like the city kind of like showed out for him, or not showed out, but showed him a lot of love. So that was at least something. Something else that I didn't really take too much into account until we started getting deeper in the series is that they weren't like, it sucks that this was the first season without Bill Russell, and the Celtics had like a good shot of winning the championship and all that. It would have been some good sentimental value there, but yeah, we'll see what happens with the Celtics team. But I feel like change is coming, and I guess I'm excited for it because I feel they're only going to be right now. They're trying to just make championship moves. I think trading Brown will be a step backwards, but I guess sometimes you have to like addition by subtraction. But I guess we got to wait and see. But that's why I'm hoping they go and kind of not shoot themselves in the foot by doing something drastic if they don't need to.
Yeah, it's hard to look at it from like now because it's again
it's like right after.
I advise you and every other Celtics fan out there, the things that you say right now are like the decisions that you would make in your head. Like it's probably a lot of it's reactionary from what you saw last night or throughout this series. Like try not to judge all this shit based off of one game or one series. Because front offices don't do that.
There'll be trades out the wazoo at the end of every offseason if that was the case.
Right. But like, like there would be
maybe would have been traded every other
bad
season.
Moves that would happen, just completely reactionary. Like again, that's why whenever Miami gets eliminated or whenever any of these teams behind me get eliminated, it's like, okay, like let it simmer for a week or two before I start thinking about like, okay, what acquisitions like could be made, should be made, or whatnot. Like I know it's the first thing that people run to after every offseason. Like, hey, trade player X. He was bad in game 7. It's just like, I don't think that's how it works. But again, people can do whatever the hell they want. I'm just saying this is like personal recommendation.
You're gonna like fry your brain thinking about it too much.
Yeah, no. It's just gonna be like angry thoughts. Like if you, especially when your team loses, it's like, oh, that player was butt cheeks in game 7. Let's trade him.
But it's a lot easier to like hop on like the Twitter machine, start shit talking and all that stuff too, trying to put people down. It's like, bro, at the end of the day, we're just spectators, and we're investing our emotions into this team. When like other than that, like we haven't like there's really no outcome that we can control to see what happens in the game unless you go and find like player X, Y, and Z and like slash their tires so they can't make it to the game on time. You know,
right?
But, those are the people who are kind of, and that's why they have security, and that's why people they don't give away that kind of information. No, but just to kind of like touch on the this final series, at least from my point of view now, and I know you mentioned Bam and like him being matched up with Jokic. I got to be honest. I feel the way the Joker has been playing this entire postseason, and just seeing what I saw out of Bam the last couple of games down the stretch in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think Bam's gonna get eaten alive. But that's just my fear, and I feel like that's like the most important matchup for them is like how Bam and how they're gonna go about stopping Jokic, because you saw what this dude did to AD in game 1 of those damn conference finals. And he was hitting this bullshit. Like, I'm talking about one-legged step backs.
He always does that. That's the thing. It's just like people watching this for the first time being like, what? And it's just like, dude, this is just what Jokic does sometimes.
So, like, shot clock. But, like, my thing is like, I looked it up here, and it's like, he's faced up against, like, good to all-star level big men this entire postseason. And a top 5 big man when healthy in Anthony Davis. He gave the Timberwolves an average of 26, 12, and 9. Then you go to Phoenix. He gave 8 in the Suns, damn near 35, 13, and 10. And then you gave the Lakers 28, 15, and 12. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, holy shit. You know, it's like that's my only thing. Because seeing like how, like the thing I give Bam credit for, he was a lot more aggressive, at least in those first 3 games. And I feel like he can become a better offensive player by taking guys off the dribble and kind of like refining that jumper he has a little bit better. I feel like he has like the ability to be a good scorer, but I feel but I just feel like Jokic is just on a different level. I just can't like see how they go about that when you saw Anthony Davis, one of the best big men in the league, get torched by this guy, a kid, an overweight kid from Serbia, I believe. But
Well,
but I want to hear your mindset in terms of that matchup anyway, because that's I think that's probably the most important. Like that's the most important matchup to look at.
Yeah, before we close this out, yeah. The thing with Bam and the thing with Jokic is they're not Bam and Jokic. Bam and AD is are two different defenders. Like Bam is more of a versatile, I can guard 1 through 5 type defender, and AD is more of like the rim protector. Like we saw the adjustment that Darvin Ham made game 1 of the series, and something that he went back to throughout those 4 games was we're going to stick really on Nikola Jokic, see if we can make it a little difficult for him. But then we're going to have AD help off of whomever as kind of a weak side helper and rim protector. So I'm not being drawn away from the rim every time. And so it's like Bam isn't necessarily that type of defender in the way Miami defends. Just from what I can briefly remember about how they defend Jokic is like they'll front him and they'll try to just be super duper physical with him. And a lot of that is Bam, but I'm sure there's going to be times throughout the series where they get mixed in a cross match or whatever the case is, and they're going to be throwing bodies on bodies on bodies at Jokic, and I don't know how well it's going to work, but I think Bam is good enough to make it tough on him. Again, I think that's where I go back to like Jokic is going to get his like that. I don't think that's a question whether it's against Bam or not. I think Miami's going to do as much as they can to make the passes, the entry passes, difficult when they're passing to Jokic, and then the passes outside of the ones that Jokic, when he has the ball in his hands, the passes that he makes. I think they're going to try to do whatever they can to stunt, deny, whatever they can do to kind of shut off those passing lanes, or at least make it difficult, or send the extra help, the late help, early help, whatever it is. And that's beyond my pay grade to what exactly that's going to look like. But just from what I know from what Eric has done against Jokic in the past, it's going to be a lot of like fronting, 3/4 high fronting, denying. We're going to have a guy help on the backside, on the baseline. We're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. And regardless of where Jokic is at, okay, well, then you're going to try to shut off every passing lane, depending on who it is. And we're going to help off of certain guys, like just shit like that. And so I don't know if it's going to be like, yeah, I think Bam it's going to be tough for him. It's going to be tough as shit. But Bam is one of the best defenders in basketball for a reason. And even though he's 6'9", I think there's the physicality of it. Jokic is one of the strongest players in the league. You could just see. And that's what makes Austin Reeves pushing him and him flopping even funnier. But like, regardless, he's one of the strongest players in the league. Bam is still going to do whatever they can to make it physical as hell on him. And I think that's just the game plan. And again, I have to go back and watch the tape, which I'm going to do after this. But what exactly will all of that look like? And I think it is the most important matchup, at least from like a Nuggets offense versus Heat defense standpoint. Because again, it's the best player in the world versus one of the best defenders in the world. A player that I thought should have probably gotten 1 or maybe 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, didn't. But he's an incredibly versatile, physical defender, and he's still going to make Jokic work for it, no matter what kind of size disadvantage he's at. And I know they think, and they know the test. They know the test. They know the challenge that Jokic presents, and I think they'll be ready for it. But I'm not saying they're going to win the series or anything, but I think they have a game plan. They might have to adjust because Jokic is just that damn good. Regardless, I don't think it's like I think I just think Jokic is going to get his, just depending on how you can limit the little shit and everything else outside of that.
Okay, I can understand that. So I feel like at the best, like they'll make it tough on him, and
they're going to make it tough on him. I don't know how well that's going to work. I don't know what exactly that's going to entail. Again, I think it's just a lot of like, we're going to front you, we're going to send help. It might not be on the catch, it might be on the drive, or whatever the case is. We're probably going to help off of certain guys, and then they're just going to try to rotate and work around that. And But I think for Jokic specifically, they're just going to make it tough. They're going to be super duper physical with them, or at least with them, as physical as they can, and see how that works. But that's just my very preliminary initial game plan. I might have more answers for you later in the week, but that's what I just think they're going to do off the rip right now.
All good. I mean, hey, we're approaching the minute 15 mark here. A lot of good basketball talking about Celtics' Game 7 blunder and the Heat Eastern Conference champions. That's the finals is locked in. You know, see, you got your time. It's good. I would say to kind of end the show, I'm gonna ask you this question: for better or for worse, or at best or at worst, I should say, for Miami to win, at best, how many games would it take? And at worst, at least in terms of like finals winners, I should say, if that makes sense. I don't know if I explained it well.
So like if Denver wins, like what's
at best, yeah, kind of like at worst, how many games would it take for Miami, and at best, how many games would it take, and then the same thing for Denver.
For Denver, at best, I think it would take 5. I don't think they're sweeping Miami. I think just Miami will just get one, like just a super hot shooting night. At worst, probably 7. For Miami, at best, I would say I actually have the same answer for at best and at worst. Actually, no, I'll just say at best, I think it goes 6 for Miami. Like, I don't see them beating Nuggets in 5 games or 4 games.
I mean, they'll have to take one on the road anyway, so
that's going to be, again, a pain in the ass.
If they can take one on the road, then I feel like they have a better than a puncher's chance anyway.
Can we play this in the bubble on even ground for 7 games?
Technically, it'll still be in Florida.
Yeah, come on, let's do it. No,
no balls. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
It's like the Batman thing. It's like, come to the street, bro. I will beat your motherfucking ass. You know, it's like, put the gun down. Let's go.
No, but I think at best, Miami would beat them in 6. Should they get a good version of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, that's again the most important thing among all of this,
shooting stays hot,
as well as the supporting cast playing up to what they are capable of. And at worst, same thing with 7. I don't really have it. If I'm being completely honest, I don't really have a series prediction set in stone yet.
Understandable.
Again, these last several days, it's been, oh my God, is my team going to blow this lead? As opposed to, oh yeah, this is the Eastern Conference Finals and they advance, or they might advance, or whatever. It's more so keeping my own, making sure I keep my own head on my own shoulders and not like, this is like the worst thing ever. Not have more positive thoughts than bad thoughts, even though that wasn't the case. But last night was the first night after I was like, oh shit, there's another series. It felt like the finals. Like just because of like the historical like
context of it all.
Miami loses this, they're first team to blow a 3-0 lead, and the legacies of Jimmy Butler, playoff Jimmy, playoff Bam, if there is a playoff Bam, Eric Spoelstra being the best coach in the league, like all of those legacies and what people would think about them from a national perspective is tarnished. And from Boston's perspective, it's like, okay, they're now, and if Miami wins, it's like, oh, they're now the second 8 seed ever to make the NBA Finals. They beat the best possible seed that they could face in each of the 3 rounds. They beat the 1 seed, they beat the 4 seed, they beat the 2 seed. And now it's like there was so much historical shit heading into last night to where I was pretty much melting in my seat. Pretty much from tip. Not from tip. Like when I woke up yesterday morning, like I was like melting, like just slowly as this day was going by, because it's like I can't have 2 of my franchises lose 3-0 leads to Boston teams And it's on the road, it's just like, oh my, like I was a mess yesterday. I was a mess the last 48 hours. I'm glad I'm better now. I'm better.
That's good. I mean, because
again, I really don't have a serious prediction for you right now. That'll probably come as the week goes by. Again, game 1's Thursday, so it's a quick turnaround. Again, that's why I wish I had the extra week. But that's just unfortunately not how things always work. But this is also just a funny fitting ending to this series. But I digress.
I would not be surprised. I don't want it to happen, but I would not be surprised these teams match up again next year if everybody plays their cards right. It seems like so. Like,
do you mean Heat Nuggets or Heat Celtics?
Heat Celtics, man. Shit. It was like this last year. It was like this the year after. For all we know, it's gonna be like just a tale of two different seasons all over again. These guys met the third straight Eastern Conference Finals. What has the Eastern Conference done to allow these teams to fight each other again?
At least we can say that our teams, just from a playoff setting, have been the best two teams for the most part over the last few seasons.
I mean, hey, like we went to 7 those last the last 2 seasons
in the East. In the East, not just in the East.
And
I like among the playoff in a playoff setting. I don't think like Miami had a considerably worse season than Milwaukee.
Yeah, but, I mean, shit. But I mean, I guess that's something to look at it as a positive anyway. I feel like the Heat next year, regardless of the outcome, I think they'll come back as a better team, like better than an 8th seed anyway. So it's interesting, but I guess it just goes to show like the level of basketball talent that's coming in the league, that you have an 8th seed finding the way in the finals. And I might even go on to say that may not be the last time for a long time that we see a lower seeded team making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, because I feel like just the level of basketball talent coming in nowadays, and just like I feel like it's eventually like teams are gonna it's gonna be a lot tighter. Like you look at the Western Conference, and like 1 through 8 was like between like 4 or 5 games between each other, something crazy like that.
But in all fairness, the Heat aren't the typical 8 seed.
Yeah.
So the Lakers aren't the typical 7 seed, especially after the trade deadline. After the post trade deadline Lakers aren't the typical 7 seed. Like this run from Miami, this is I think the greatest 8 seed run of all time. Just to contextualize it, the only other 8 seed to make it was the 99 Knicks. But they were 6 games back of the first place team. That was in a lockout season. Miami was 14 games back of Milwaukee this season. They beat Milwaukee in 5 games, and of course, like the rest is history with what they've done so far. But like I think this is the greatest 8 seed run of all time. That's from a little bit of a biased perspective, but not all 8 seeds have Jimmy Butler.
If it makes me feel better, that this 8 seed Miami team probably would have beat that next team in 5 games. So
right. But like the 7 seeds don't typically have a LeBron James and Anthony Davis. There's like caveats to like the specific like play-in structure. Like there's going to be the anomalies for some years that just happens, like this season. Like I don't think many people didn't expect Miami to be an 8 seed heading into the season. A lot of it was like, I think I had them 4th or 5th. I can't remember what exactly it was, but it was kind of in that range. And it's just, they had a bad season. They fall to the 8, they get hot at the right moment. Boom, here they are. And they look like the team that we all thought they should have looked like, and that they kind of looked like last season. And so it's like, from that perspective, that's great. That's awesome. But they're not the typical 8 seeds that make it like this. And so that's where it's like the caveat of like the gap might close. I don't disagree. There's more talent. I think the league is going to be as talented as it's ever been, especially after Wemby and Scoot. And those guys come in. But then like you're going to have those weird anomalies being like that team doesn't – the 8 seed doesn't typically have that player on that team, typically. They're usually a better team than that, but I guess we'll figure out down the line. But so I don't entirely disagree, but this year was a weird year when it came to like the play-ins.
And just like the postseason altogether, you had the 8 seed conference finals. Something else is that it's funny. The Celtics throughout the season were like really bad against lower seeded teams, and funny enough, it's the 8th seed that makes the conference finals with them. So I mean, I guess that's just something to look at. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's something. It don't matter. The season's over. So got the NBA Finals to look forward to. Matt, another great hour and 24 minutes with you, man. Even if like me talking to you at least for me, from my standpoint, is on the best of circumstances. I'm past it. I fucking let out all my grievances yesterday when I was talking to my little brother, who was like a big basketball head. So, but I was curious to hear a lot of your thoughts, especially and like I truly meant what I said when you were at Class Act, because I have Miami Heat friends, and like they give your fan base a bad name because lack for a better term can be kind of douchebaggery if
I can too. I can too.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can.
Oh, absolutely. If you check the Twitter sphere, I can be absolutely.
You could probably talk your shit with person.
But I don't have any ill intent. I just like.
You like your team.
Yeah, I like my team.
You like your team.
People say anything bad about my team.
It can. That's how sports fandom can be. It can always just come down to I just like my team.
I just like my team.
But yeah. Other than that, a lot of good basketball talk about these conference finals. NBA finals start on Thursday. Yep, Jerry Walker, the main man, is going to be rooting for his Nuggets as well as you going to be rooting for your Miami Heat. For me, I'm all good in terms of talking about stuff. If you got anything you want to chime in about or anything like that, I know it was really basketball heavy, but I think it was necessary.
I'm good, man. We can keep it at that. I know we're now supposed to keep it right around an hour, so we.
Hey, you know what? It's all good. You know, we had a lot of good discussion. There was a lot of things to talk about, especially coming off that Game 7 loss. So I think we'll be okay with going over a little bit today. But okay, Matt, it's always a pleasure. I'm rooting for a good series, and best of luck to you and your Miami Heat, because I know, good God, I said in the Slack, but I know you guys are gonna need it because my God, the Nuggets.
Every part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I can only, like, watching the games, I can only imagine how you're going to be feeling, man. But no, but always a pleasure, man. Always fun. If you guys did enjoy, be sure to follow us on Twitch at Vendetta Sports Media. Be sure to check out the YouTube and check us out on vendettasportsmedia.com to stay up to date with all your latest sports and also the NBA Finals coverage and all that good stuff over there. With all that being said, Matt, again, it's been fun, been a pleasure. I've been Jermaine Pena. Everybody take care and stay safe out there and enjoy the NBA Finals come Thursday.